my issue, especially in the beginning, were my own beliefs and my own excuses. Until you really, I think, acknowledge that period and move forward with that and just decide that you're not going to get in your own way, nothing's really going to happen for you. So it's really just a matter of showing up every day and providing help wherever you can to somebody else without asking anything in return. And just being yourself, because then you'll connect with people who actually like you if you're not pretending to be somebody else.
What's going on? It's your friend, Jonathan Frederick. And on today's episode, we dive deep into podcasting. Not only that, we go into weekly reviews. Not going to guarantee I read one of these every single week, but today we're going to read one, and it's a good review. So stay tuned for that in just a moment. Ron Honeycutt's review today. We have Dr. Honeycutt here. It says, great podcast. Heart Healthy Hustle is a great resource, especially for young professionals. The interviews are informative and present important. Practical principles for individuals to apply for gaining economic stability and simultaneously keeping emotional and physical balance. Time listening to these podcasts is time well invested that will pay solid dividends when the key ideas are applied. Listen, think through what is being shared, and then apply and succeed. Dr. H. Thank you, Ron, so much for listening to the podcast and for leaving an awesome review. You guys are awesome. They really do help out a lot. Really appreciate them more than you know. Welcome back to another inspiring episode of the Heart Healthy Hustle podcast. Today's guest is a podcast launch consultant, editor, and podcaster with nearly 300 of her own podcast episodes across 3 different podcasts. Britany Felix, spelled with 1 T, specializes in helping coaches and consultants launch podcasts that build brand awareness and generate new leads for their businesses. I found Britany's podcast called Podcasting for Coaches very helpful. I recommend it for anyone considering starting a podcast or improving an existing podcast. Britany, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. And I have to say, you are one of my new favorite people because you emphasize the fact that I only have 1 T in my name.
There we go. So I'm going to give a brief background. I met Britany through a podcasting support group on Facebook, and I don't know how many thousands of people are in there. I had made a comment on when is it time to outsource editing podcasts. Britany jumped in and was super helpful, gave a bunch of her time putting down referrals to other editors that she knows to be great, and I really appreciated her, and I checked out her podcast is phenomenal. Britany, you are in the perfect niche right now with the podcast exploding. Being a newer podcaster, I looked at your lineup of episodes and I was like, I just want to click every single one. I want to hear what she has to say. So anyway, you want to fill in any gaps from that intro? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And I love that you touched on the fact that, yes, I do specialize in working with coaches and consultants on starting podcasts for their business. But when it comes to starting a podcast, the mechanics of it are pretty much the same, no matter what topic you're going to talk about or who you are. So I really appreciate that you understood the fact that those episodes can really be beneficial to everyone. If you want to know how to start a podcast, you absolutely can get that from that. So I appreciate that. And just a little bit of a background. I'm obsessed with travel. My original podcast, which had nearly 200 episodes, was called Living Unconventionally, where I interview people who ditched a traditional life and traveled full time.
Gotcha. With traveling, would you explain what it is like to work and be truly location independent?
It's never the same. It is always a new challenge, always something exciting. I like to travel as much as I can. My husband actually still works full-time in a corporate job, so most of the time I'm traveling without him. Actually, almost exactly 1 year ago, I was just getting back from spending 6 weeks in Southeast Asia, and I spent a month in Bali and then a week in Chiang Mai, Thailand. And it was very interesting keeping my business going and recording podcast episodes and all of those things while I was over there. Each location is so different and so challenging. We spent a few months traveling in an RV a couple of years ago, and I pretty much had to stop my podcast and my business at that point just because the internet connection was unbelievably difficult. And I mean, I was working in, these little Starbucks cafes at a grocery store every now and then taking, 20 minutes to upload one audio file. And it was very frustrating. But no matter what challenges I face, no matter how stressful it is to be truly location independent, I will take that 100 times out of 100 over, a corporate office any day.
Gotcha. So what's your favorite place that you've traveled to? Do you have one favorite?
Yes, I do. My one favorite place is Paris. My husband and I honeymooned in Paris. We went there and I had been dreaming about it for years and years and years. And we finally got to go. And it was just this amazing roller coaster of emotion. We had a bomb scare at the airport as soon as we landed after we'd been traveling for like 17 hours. Then I saw the Eiffel Tower for the first time. So I was like crying with tears. Oh, they lost my luggage when we landed as well. So it was just this like, oh, we almost got mugged. All kinds of crazy things happening in this like 1 week span that we were in Paris. But it was so amazing. So unbelievably amazing. And then my second favorite is actually Chiang Mai, Thailand. I thought it was going to be very unnerving. It was my first completely solo international trip. When I was in Bali for a month, I was actually living with a group of about 15 digital nomads. But Thailand was completely solo, all on my own in a country where I didn't speak the language. And I thought I was going to be so uncomfortable the whole time. And it was one of the best experiences I've ever had in my entire life.
That's really neat.
Yeah.
I just had read a quote and I don't remember it. Good intentions and joy transcend every language.
Yeah.
You can still communicate so much without actually speaking a certain language.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, unless you're in a certain country, like Paris specifically, where smiles are interpreted as flirting, generally a smile goes a long way when you're in another country. And yeah, I think it's true. You can see those good intentions on the people you're interacting with, and they can see it inside you. And you can really make some incredible connections without having to, be able to speak fluently with each other.
If you had to boil it down and distill 1 to 3 of the main things that you learned from interviewing all those people, what would that be?
Ooh, so I did have almost 200 episodes. I released 3 a week, but I only conducted about 70 or 80 interviews because we split it based on the content. But I mean, even still, speaking with 70 or 80 people who have these amazing life experiences is something that I am so grateful for. And I think an overarching theme amongst almost all of the guests was just this intense desire and passion to have freedom. And that's freedom of time, of location, of choice. That was something I was really experiencing. And when I started that podcast, I was in corporate and I was getting the soul sucked out of me every single day. And just hearing these people, they just sounded so free. And it was just so inspiring and amazing. Every time I would talk to one of these new people, I would just get that much more ignited to go after my dreams so much harder. They had a myriad of different ways that they had all left behind a traditional life. They were all traveling in different parts of the world, doing different types of businesses. So, I mean, there were just so many ways that this could happen. And I didn't necessarily think that was possible when I started the podcast. I would hear all of these stories of these people who had these amazing lives. And I would always say, yeah, that's great for them, but that would never work for me because of this, this, this. And so it really just helped me get rid of those limiting beliefs and know that there are a million different ways to make your dreams happen. You just kind of have to start going down that path and let it go where it's going to go. Don't try and force it to go where you think it should, because you're never going to end up where you thought you would be. And if you stop trying to force it and you just let things happen, A, you're just going to have so much less stress because you're not going to be fighting against every single thing that comes your way. And B, you're going to actually get where you want to go.
I just did an Instagram live earlier, Britany, and I was speaking about how my life changed when I stopped making excuses. And the reason I did that was similar to you interviewing these guests on travel. You're learning, oh, if they can do it, why not me? Or here's a list of how their life improved when they did it and they made the leap. No excuses is great, saying that to yourself, but it's not enough. So one thing that really worked for me, I started an athletic apparel company. I decided, you know what, I lost maybe $400 on one batch of hoodies I made. And the first batch of stuff, I kept making more t-shirts. They were doing great, about breaking even, which is actually pretty good for when just starting. Long story short, another guy with a similar mission, virtually mirroring each other. We both got in touch with each other, pretty much launching the same time. He was killing it, doing really well, connecting with people. I remember putting my stuff on the shelf, and that business, I was like, I'm going to come back to this, but for right now, it's not what I want to be focusing all my energy on. This was just before recording episodes for this show. So then a year goes by, I open up Instagram, I go to, for some reason, I just thought, let me go ahead and check out what he's up to. So I checked in with how he's doing, and he had just bought a Lamborghini. Now, the Lamborghini money was largely because he has other online businesses. He does not just have one source of income, and his clothing company was successful. He made over 6 figures, and not saying that was all net profit, but that's still very good for the first year. And I was amazed, and I thought to myself, this is a guy just like me. He's just like me. We started our things at the same exact time. This is amazing. And so that realization combined with what I found out, one of the things that he does is no excuses, actually no excuses, and do it anyway. When I realized that that's what it took for him to start making real moves, that's when it clicked for me. I was like, if he can do it, I can do it. I know I can. And that realization of realizing like I can do it, it's really what got the gears moving.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing I'm sure gets talked about a lot on this show is that you are going to have 1,000 obstacles come up along the way. Every step, everything you do, there's going to be some kind of an obstacle. And if you allow yourself to let those become a problem, they're absolutely going to stop you dead in your tracks. And I mean, those obstacles can be things that you even create for yourself, like with imposter syndrome and self-limiting beliefs. So you can get in your own way. And that was my problem. I can generally figure things out when they happen with, tech and, the actual mechanics of having a business. But my issue, especially in the beginning, were my own beliefs and my own excuses. Until you really, I think, acknowledge that period and move forward with that and just decide that you're not going to get it in your own way, nothing's really going to happen for you.
All right, let's get focused on podcasting. For many of my past guests, even just my past guests, I'll be talking to them after the show. And I'm like, you guys should start a podcast. Did you ever think about starting a podcast? And they're like, yeah, I have. People have been telling me that. I just didn't want to put the time into it right now. I didn't prioritize it. So you are the person that I'm excited to talk to about this, Britany, because of your expertise and experience. If you could sit down and, having coffee, what's stopping you? And they just said, oh, well, I have so much stuff going on. I do believe it would be beneficial and people would tune in, but I'm not familiar with the context of the platform. Maybe I'm in my 50s, 70s, 40s, whatever. It doesn't matter what age. But what would you share with them? What are the biggest benefits that they would see if they stayed long-term with a high-quality podcast?
The biggest benefits, it depends on what their objective is. Some people just want it as a creative outlet, in which case it's, the return on that's almost immediate. You just create that content and you put it out there and you feel great at doing that. You have something that exists in the world, a kind of legacy that you're leaving. But if you're actually wanting some real benefits in terms of a business, that absolutely translates into establishing yourself as an expert in a particular niche, whatever yours is, networking with other people who are going to either refer people to you as clients or are going to become your partners in some endeavor at some point. It also translates into direct leads. You're going to have people who listen to your show and they're going to connect with you immediately. You are in their ear. You're becoming quickly a confidant to them. Like they can think about all of their hangups when they're listening to you or all of their issues around whatever your topic is. And you're guiding them. You're giving them advice on this. And you're their go-to person, even though you've never actually spoken to them before. So when it's time for them to take an action, buy a course or buy, some kind of a product or hire a coach to help them with something, it's a no-brainer. You're the one that they're going to go to because you're the one they've been going to for however long they've been listening to your show. So again, it really just depends on the direction and what that specific person, that I would be speaking to is looking to achieve. But podcasting, I firmly believe, is the greatest medium there is right now. There are so many, there are just so many blogs and there are so many podcasts too, but obviously blogging has been around for a very long time.
Right.
And even if you can inject as much of your personality as possible into that writing, if you are an amazing copywriter and you can really jump from that page, you're still not connecting with the reader the way you would via a podcast because you are with them when they are working out. You're with them when they're cleaning their house. You're with them when they're walking their dog. You're with them on their morning commute. You're with them on their lunch break. You are there in their daily lives. You become like a friend to them. They're not reading your blogs while they're driving to and from work every day. So it just establishes a whole different level of connection that even video can't do because people are not going to sit on Facebook, generally speaking, and watch an hour-long video. That's not the purpose of that content. That's not the purpose of that platform. But it's not uncommon for people to listen through an entire hour-long podcast episode because A, maybe they're working out, or B, maybe they're picking it up and listening to it at various times of the day, but they still finish it. If I stop watching a Facebook video, I'm not ever going to go back to that. I'm just not. More content's going to come on my feed. I don't care. I'll move on with my life.
Yeah.
But if I'm in the middle of an hour-long podcast episode and I'm really interested, you can bet I'm definitely going to make sure I finish it at some point.
Exactly. And to touch on the fact that you said there are a lot of podcasts too, very true. I found this very encouraging. There's a lot of podcasts, but it's just getting warmed up. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Only like 60% of the entire United States even are familiar with the term of podcast. And that doesn't even necessarily mean that they listen. So the room for it to grow is still huge.
And it takes time to get used to it and to let yourself enjoy podcasts. Once you open the app a dozen times and you start to dabble in certain shows, you start to get attached to the guest or to the content you're absorbing. Like you said, it's ease of absorption. I agree with you on that medium comment, the comments you made about the medium of podcasting, because it's so doable. You can listen to it anywhere, anytime, doing anything. Like you said, anywhere, it's amazing to me. One of the things to encourage people who may be thinking, oh, I'm too late to the show, too late to the party, whatever that is, I don't think you are, because podcasts and podcasters, there's a ton of podcasts, but I think what was it? Do you know the stat, Brittany? I think it was at least 70% of podcasts that are counted in the total number of shows, they're dead podcasts.
Exactly. They have like less than 8 episodes in their feeds. And they pod faded is what they call it.
Pod fade, that's right.
Yeah, so many podcasts exist out there that, only have a couple of episodes and haven't released anything new in years. But the feed's still there, it's still going. Why, I have no idea, because they have to pay for that, generally speaking. But yeah, no, if you are there and you're consistent, that's a huge component of it. If you are consistently releasing content, you're going to stand out above so many other people, because most people honestly just don't stick with it.
Speaking on active podcasts and paying for that hosting, is your travel podcast still active?
I actually sold that podcast. So it is still active, but it is somebody else who is running that now. He actually legally, as part of our agreement, the terms and conditions of the sale, he has to keep the feed active for 2 years from the time it was sold, regardless of whether or not he releases content anyways, because that's a lot of content that I put out there. And I didn't want it to just disappear, because that show was my baby, but it was time to move on. And I had a listener reach out to me who absolutely loved it, had been listening for a while, and it aligned with the business that he was starting. So yeah, he kind of took it over. It was called Living Unconventionally.
Living Unconventionally. A lot of people have asked, and a lot of my listeners, almost 1 out of 3 people will say something about, I want to hear about traveling. I want to hear people who are traveling all the time and being paid to travel or working independent location-wise, and that's something people are very interested in. For podcasters specifically, networking is huge. I think I'd agree with you I think that's largely one of the most beneficial things from starting mine is, I was scratching my own itch. I was thinking, how can I find people who I look up to and get on a call with them and just kind of pick their brain and learn from them, and obviously have a systematic, structured approach to that as to respect their time. It really is huge, because the networking thing works. I mean, when you're on a podcast, you're having a conversation, you're building relationships, and it's huge. It's so powerful, and that's really neat. For podcasters specifically, maybe they have a business and they already have a podcast. How can we get over the hump of being unknown?
Yeah, so that's actually something that comes up quite a bit, and I'm not sure when this is going to air, but that's an episode that's coming up on my podcast next week, actually, is how to grow your audience. So a lot of people put this podcast out there and they think it's if we build it, they'll come kind of a thing. And then they just plateau in terms of downloads, and they're not really seeing any kind of growth. But one thing that people constantly forget about podcasts is that you are still speaking to real live human beings. I know it feels pretty lonely sometimes, because you're just sitting in a room sometimes by yourself. And if you record solo episodes, you're talking to yourself, but you're actually really talking to a specific person. So have a conversation with them just like you would normally. Get them engaged in that conversation. So build a space for them where they can come to connect with you further. For most people, that's an email list or a Facebook community, those types of things. Build that sense of community around your audience so that they're engaging not just with you, but with each other. And then what they're going to do once they have that safe, fun space to talk about everything related to your podcast, they're going to share that with others, for one. But another thing is that a lot of people kind of tend to forget about, especially if they have a solo show. I mean, word of mouth, is the absolute hands down best way to grow your audience. That's it, period, flat out. So if you're not sharing it places where other people can share it, then you're shooting yourself in the foot. If you're not encouraging your listeners to share it, if you're not encouraging your guests to share it, those are all things you need to be doing hands down. The other thing is you need to be on other podcasts, because the main issue with podcasts is that, as we talked about earlier, there's still so many people who don't understand what a podcast is. They don't know how to listen. They don't know what benefits it has for them. They don't even know that it's free. They think you have to pay for it. So if you get on other podcasts, you're already overcoming the main objections for why somebody is not listening to podcasts already, because they already are a podcast listener. So you're overcoming that huge hurdle right off the bat, it's not even an issue. You're getting in front of people who are already prone to listening to podcasts. So if you get on there and you are completely authentic and open and you let your personality shine through while also still letting some of your expertise come out, then those listeners are going to resonate with you as well. And it's not necessarily about stealing listeners from somebody else because, I mean, as I'm sure you know, most podcast listeners listen to multiple podcasts. So you're going to have some crossovers in terms of your audience, and they're going to start following your show, which in turn is going to lead to more people joining your community, more people sharing. So it just ripples out.
Yes, love that. I want to ask, well, then what's the best way to grow? Which you just gave us a huge list that we can all implement. Anyone who's a podcaster or is building a brand. You said share where others can share it. Be on other podcasts. One thing about being on other podcasts is, like, you're on my show today. What do you think would be a good approach to getting on other shows? I'm actually going to be on one as a guest tomorrow, and I'm really excited about that. That was kind of weird how that one came about, though, so I'm not really counting that one. But what would you recommend?
So consistently reaching out, but being smart about how you're reaching out. So that way you're limiting your time and your effort and your rejections. So there are a couple of different things that you can do to get on more podcasts. One is join Facebook groups and pay attention to the different things that they post in there, because most groups have a particular day of the week where you can do like a guest interview exchange. So you can post that you are available for a guest, and then other podcast hosts will post that they are looking for guests that meet, a list of criteria. So even though there are sometimes 70, 100 plus comments on those posts, take the time to sit down and go through them on that day. Just make it a part of your daily routine for whatever day of the week that is, depending on the group that you're in, and read through those and see which ones you're going to be a good guest for. Have a little bit of a description or a bio written up, like a little elevator pitch of you and your story already written up, so you can just copy and paste it every time. Most likely, those people, especially if you're kind of self-qualifying yourself and meeting their criteria, they're going to be happy to get you on their show. Now, are these going to be shows that are going to have massive audiences? Absolutely not. But that's not really the key, because those shows that have massive audiences, they don't exactly have the best listener engagement. Because I know that if I listen to Gary Vaynerchuk's show and I try to reach out to him, I'm not going to get a response from Gary V. But if I'm following somebody who has 100 podcast subscribers or 100 people in their community and I reach out to them, I'm probably going to get a response. So that's the community that I'm going to be in, and that's what it's going to, work out for the people whose shows you're on. So if they don't have a massive audience, that's fine, as long as they engage with that audience. And then beyond that, there are a couple of other things you can do. One, there's something called Radio Guest List, which is something that I used when I was doing interviews for my show, and I'm on it now as a guest. You can A, find guests for your own show, but B, list yourself as a featured guest. So you can put your bio, links to your website, whatever it is, your projects, and then people will reach out to you that way if they feel that you're a good fit for their show. And then there's also actual companies where this is what they do. They pitch you 2 podcasts and they get you on, so many shows a month. Now, obviously that's the most expensive option because you're paying for a service, but it is still an option out there if you just flat out have no time, but you do have the resources to pay somebody else to help you do that.
Very cool. Very cool. Have you been listing yourself as a guest for quite some time? And if so, has it benefited you?
So I actually only am just recently making this a priority for my current podcast.
Okay.
Back when I was doing my original one, yes, I was really active in being guests on other shows. And absolutely, I would have people say, hey, I found you through this podcast and I'm so glad I did. This episode was amazing. So you get that feedback and you can kind of find out where they're coming from. And in my Facebook community that I was building for my original one of my questions was, how did you hear about my podcast? And so they would put in there that they heard about me on, so-and-so show. So you can really kind of gauge where those people are coming from, because a lot of times they're generally happy to say how they found you.
Wow. So you work with a lot of coaches, a lot of coaching businesses. Is that right?
Yeah, I try to work mostly with like solopreneurs or people who have really small teams. Yeah, they're all coaches or, consultants.
Okay. What are some of the biggest things that you notice from working with solopreneurs?
So for most people, just like you mentioned before, they say they don't have the time. They've been thinking about starting a podcast for a while, but they don't have the time. What they really mean is they don't have the time to figure out this whole new thing that seems incredibly overwhelming to them. Podcasting is like this just giant cloud hanging above their head. They know that they want to be doing it. They know they probably should do it, but they don't have the mental capacity to take on something else right now while they're in the middle of running their own business. And so one thing that I really help them with is breaking that process down so it doesn't seem overwhelming. The actual mechanics of starting a podcast, like I said earlier, are pretty basic. You have certain steps you have to meet, certain tasks you have to do. And if you just take it one at a time, it's not overwhelming at all. And it really doesn't take all that much time. Now, once they get going, that's a little bit different. You have, as you know, interviewing people, planning out content, sharing it on social media, managing your guests, like all of those things. But generally the people that I work with, they're in a position where they can have a VA who helps with those more administrative type of tasks. So I help them understand the whole process a little bit better and know really how much time it's actually going to take them.
That makes sense. A lot of people, it's a time thing, and that approach can be applied to anything that you guys are putting off. Maybe you're scared or nervous to launch something, not necessarily even a podcast.
Oh yeah, I'm going through that right now. I have had the idea to create my own online course about 1.5 years ago, and it still doesn't exist because I've let myself do that. I just say I don't have the time. And really it's this whole new thing I've never done before that's kind of intimidating. And I've just had to not make excuses and suck it up and just start taking one step at a time and make progress, even if it's just a little bit of progress. As long as I'm constantly making those tiny little bits of progress, I'm still at least moving towards a final finished product.
One thing I noticed when I ask for reviews, it's usually doesn't seem to work. People are busy. They're not going to do something that they didn't already have planned in their mind. I noticed one thing, and this is true for me as well. For an example of a review where I ask, hey, would you guys leave a review? People will. But I noticed that even for me, when I'd listen to a podcast, it took me 8 episodes before I left a review. And the only reason I left a review was because the interview or the episode impacted me so much that at the end of it, when I heard that outro, I actually heard that for the first time, that he was actually asking for my help. That could be another reason where people think to themselves, oh, they don't really need the help. They're probably doing fine. This is a great show. What's your opinion on that? Word of mouth is so powerful, but then how can we facilitate listeners actually sharing the podcast?
I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here.
Please. Because
ratings and reviews are unbelievably overrated. It's a great intention that you had with thinking. Possibly. It's a great intention that you had in thinking, oh, I really need to help this person. They're asking me to do this review. I'm going to do that for them as my way of showing appreciation and my way of saying thanks. The thing is, that review probably didn't do a single thing for that podcaster or that show.
Fair.
Not nearly as much as it would have if you had written a heartfelt social media post and maybe tagged a couple of people who you thought could really have benefited from that episode as well. So please, 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 please stop asking for rating and reviews. I literally cannot say that enough. I have 0 ratings and 0 reviews on my podcast, but I'm still getting clients. It does not help grow your show. Not really. That's an old leftover myth from the new and noteworthy days of iTunes, which isn't even iTunes anymore. And new and noteworthy hasn't worked in almost 3 years. So I want people to stop saying that, because just like you said, you heard it 8 times before you even registered that you were actually hearing that, because it is so overused. Everybody hears that, and so it no longer registers. It's just like white noise now. So if you do instead, remember that you're speaking to a real live person and do a heartfelt ask from them. I really want more people to hear this message. I really want to inspire more people. I really want to connect more people, help more people, educate more people, whatever your podcast does for your audience. Will you please help me in this mission and help me share it? Tag 3 friends in this episode who you think can really benefit from this, who you want to help, something like that. Remember that you are asking a real human being to do something, to take time out of their day and do something for you. And if you show your appreciation for that, even if it's just in terms of responding to that post, say, hey, tag me in this so I can say thank you. And then you actually respond back to them. Most people are so happy with that. I mean, I know whenever I tweet to a podcast host, especially if there's someone who's a little bit larger and they actually respond back to me, almost like a celebrity freaking responded to me. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And it just kind of gives you a little bit of a high and forms that bond even more. So just remember you're asking a real person to do a real thing, and stop asking for ratings and reviews, because it really doesn't hardly do anything for your show.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely will. I'm not going to include that on this episode. I'm kind of tempted just to tease you to leave it at the end. You're like, why did he leave that in there? I admit it. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
You hear it 1,000 times when you're listening to podcasts. So if you do something unique and you do a heartfelt ask for something that you actually want them to do, they're much more likely to actually do that for you.
That is powerful. What's your favorite then? I would say Instagram. Would you say that, or Facebook?
So I don't really, I am not great at Instagram. I'm kind of terrible with social media. So for me, it's joining my Facebook community. That's where I want to build my engagement and my audience. But I mean, it was really just kind of getting them to interact with me, because if they started forming that relationship with me on yet another platform, they were so much more likely to do even more things for me, which it wasn't necessarily. That's why I wanted to engage with them, was to try and get them to do things for me. It's just when you have that relationship with somebody, I mean, as you know, if you're friends with someone, which is what it ends up feeling like, you're willing to do anything for them. I mean, you want to help them. And it doesn't feel like you're giving up your time or your energy, or, you know, you're doing all these things without getting anything in return. It's a symbiotic relationship, and you want to help each other. So if you build that engagement and that relationship, they're not even going to question trying to bring other people into that so that they can experience it as well, and then B, just doing whatever you need them to do.
Okay, for single people, especially who are solopreneurs, it can be lonely to be an entrepreneur. It just can. With you traveling so much, can you share with the listeners a tip for connecting with other entrepreneurs through the internet? Yes, there are communities. Yes, there are groups, but how to actually get the most out of those and give back so that you can actually benefit the others in the group as well. I actually just launched a Facebook group as well. I was posting a Facebook Live video to introduce the people to the group. I said, thanks for joining the Facebook group. I'm so excited you're here. And then I went on to the list of groups that I'm a part of. And only out of like 10 to, I think there's like 15, only one of them, Britany, did I feel confident and comfortable enough to post a live quick video of me saying something. Let's say somebody's a solopreneur. What's a way that we can facilitate connection with others online? Because so many of these groups and communities are intimidating to approach, or if you are involved in them, it's hard to at times find that. That is something I wanted to let you know I admired with your approach to helping me out when I first met you in that podcasters support group, because I was thinking to myself, who is this person? Like, so nice, just giving me this feedback. So if you could touch on that at all.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm not the person to do that, because that's just kind of how I am in general. So, I mean, when I'm helping somebody, I don't even really think about it, because I remember what it was like for me when I was first starting, and I had so many. I mean, I paid $1,200 to go through John Lee Dumas's, podcast launch course, and I still had an unbelievable amount of questions. And I always felt so intimidated and embarrassed sharing those questions, because, maybe I should know this already. Maybe it's in the course. Like, does everybody else understand this? And I don't, and I'm the idiot. And I just remember what that was like. And I don't want other people to feel that way. And so now that I have, a few years later and all this experience and expertise, if I can take, 30 seconds out of my day and answer a question for you that might take you, 20 minutes to an hour to find on your own, it's not really, it's a no-brainer for me to do that. And so I think it's just making that part of your daily routine. So for me, I am in those Facebook groups every single day. But I mean, if you want to connect with other entrepreneurs, get in groups for that specifically. And I would recommend avoiding groups that are like 100,000 people or more.
Yeah.
Because you're just not going to interact with the same people all the time. Some of the people that I've connected with online, I've become friends with in general. And we just connected the same way you and I did in a Facebook group, and we just clicked. And it's because we see each other constantly. So I see them constantly commenting, and they see me constantly commenting. And we start to, again, form that bond and that connection, and we become familiar with each other. So now, at this podcast conference, I'm going to Podcast Movement in 2019, and we already now are a group of us are getting an Airbnb together, to help split the cost and to spend time with each other. We've never met before. We've just connected in these Facebook groups. So it's really just a matter of showing up every day and providing help wherever you can to somebody else without asking anything in return, and just being yourself, because then you'll connect with people who actually like you if you're not pretending to be somebody else.
And I like that you added it's just who you are, because I'm similar personality where if I wasn't, I probably wouldn't even think to ask that question of how to do it better.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think that reflects it. You don't have to be that kind of person per se, but people are not a means to an end. So if you are doing this, it should be for good reasons. That's so cool, by the way, the Airbnb networking there. I don't think I've ever heard that as a viable option up until this past year. Oh yeah, we met at this conference, or we met online, and there's like 4 or 5 people. So even if one of them is a creep, they're not going to do anything because there's a group of people. So you'd be okay.
Exactly. Well, and I mean, we're all women, and so it's like it's just a lot more comfortable. And yeah, I mean, how amazing is that? We're going to really, really connect, not just at this conference where there's thousands of other people, but we're literally going to be waking up and eating breakfast with each other every day and carpooling back and forth. Like, so many connections and memories are going to be made during that, and potentially business partnerships. And who knows what's going to come from that in the future.
Yeah.
All from just interacting in Facebook via comments.
That's so powerful. I think that's where Facebook shines. Something like that. If you really capitalize on in that way, that's amazing. That really reflects a lot of initiative on your part. It's kind of what you make of it.
Absolutely.
I was at a conference in October. Just like you said, you'll be sharing an Airbnb with people. At the end of the day, you go back to like the conference, you're done, long day, on your feet all day, walking around, meeting people, you're kind of exhausted. Maybe you guys stop out for dinner and then you head back to the place, kind of hang out a little bit before going to sleep for the next day. Well, I stayed in an Airbnb by myself. So I rented a room. It was actually very affordable. It was only a mile or two from the conference. But I actually rented one of those scooters. It was a Lime scooter, and I would like commute with it. And I also use Lyft and Uber most of the time. It was so fun, but I still thought to myself, you know what? I met a group of girls there who did the same thing. They were like, yeah, we're all in an Airbnb together. And I was like, that is so cool, because you have a group of friends. You're not alone at the end of the day. You're hanging out. So I really like that approach. That's neat. Yeah.
And I mean, I classify myself technically as an introvert. I mean, this is why I do podcasts where people don't have to see me.
True.
So yeah. The idea of doing, like, I love having my alone time. And the idea of like there always being somebody around is a little bit, nerve-wracking to me. But that's why I'm going to this event. It's 4 days. I can suck it up. And I'm not wasting all of that time doing those things, commuting back and forth, going to dinner by myself, all of these things where I'm doing it alone, wherein I could be networking and forming relationships. So I'm just going to suck it up, pretend to be an extrovert for a few days, and maximize all of my time at that conference by spending as much time with other people as I can.
And not to mention save a good amount of money by doing everything together.
Absolutely. Yeah, the hotel room was going to be about $1,000 for 5 nights for the conference, or we can rent this like gorgeous luxury Airbnb, and it's about $200 a person.
Love it. So. And today's sponsor is Airbnb. So what a good time. And I wouldn't say I'm an introvert. I really love being around people, but I love my alone time. And not only that, I need it. I think that's cool. What you said there was pretend to be an extrovert for 4 days and then go back to normal, whatever that is. And not being someone you're not, but I'm more introverted. Britany, you shared you kind of are an introvert. I just think introverts in particular, when you get out of your shell and just let yourself be uncomfortable and just let yourself experience others and really put yourself out there, you find you do very well. And you actually will have a great freaking time. I'm telling you, for me at this conference, I was like, people will probably think I was a motivational speaker. I wasn't obnoxious or anything, but the way I was showing up was so intentional and so present that I was really connecting with a lot of people, and it was a blast. And I got to tell you, I was exhausted after.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's not necessarily that you're not being someone you're not. It's just you're showcasing a certain part of your personality that you tend to reserve for those you're most comfortable with. And you just turn it on just for a few days. And when you get back, you're exhausted. You just want to curl up in your bed for like 3 days and just completely recharge. But I mean, you have maximized your time there. You have really made so many connections at those conferences. If you let yourself be in those uncomfortable situations, you're going to start to get more comfortable with them. And to kind of touch back on travel a little bit, I am an introvert, but when I lived in Bali for a month with digital nomads, I had never met a single one of them before. And here I am living in this house with a bunch of people who are nothing like me in general. I mean, we come from different parts of the world. We speak different languages. We do different jobs. But if you let yourself come out of that shell, you're going to find that you can relate and connect to so many people that you never thought you could before. Because we're all human beings. We're all striving for success, whatever that means to each one of us. We all want to be happy in whatever way that brings us. So we all have some commonalities that we can kind of build from and use that as a foundation. Even if it's just a surface level connection, just find that mutual ground, and if you're at that conference, you've already found it. You've already gotten rid of a huge hurdle. You're both clearly interested in whatever this conference is about, and you will be amazed at what ends up happening afterwards.
Before we go, I want to share with you my favorite question. Call it the park bench paradigm. Britany, you could see your younger self sitting on a park bench, no one else really around, maybe a dog or a duck here or there. And you could walk up, sit on the bench, put your hand around your own shoulder and say something. What would you tell your younger self and why?
I think I would tell her that her instinct that she is not meant for a normal life is spot on, and to never doubt that and never doubt herself, and to trust her instincts and her gut as far as that goes, and to just pursue life with an intense passion and not let anyone stand in her way. The reason I say that is because I have always known since I was a little girl that I was not meant to be, a suburban soccer mom. Not that there is anything wrong with that whatsoever. And I let life get in the way. And I did things the way I thought I was supposed to. I went to college, not too far from home, so it was a little bit safe. I, went into a corporate world, and I nothing's really a waste, but I just spent so many years of my life trying to be who I thought I should be and not who I really knew I was. And I would just tell that little girl to just trust herself.
Thank you for sharing that, Britany. And thanks so much for coming on and talking with us today. I appreciate your time and sharing your expertise and just having a good time. It's fun.
Yeah, I had a great time, and I really appreciate you having me and extending the interview so that we could chat a little bit further, because I agree this has been a great conversation.
How can my audience connect with you further after the show?
Yeah, so they can find me. I'm podcasting for coaches everywhere. So podcastingforcoaches.com, Podcasting for Coaches Facebook page and community. I am on Instagram. It's my name there, which, as you mentioned, Britany_Felix_. And I am completely open for people to contact me if they have any questions. I do offer free 30-minute consultations to just kind of talk with people and find out whether or not a podcast would be a good fit.
Awesome. Congratulations on making it to the end of this episode. What about this episode stood out to you? Next, I need your help sharing this show. I want this podcast to impact and reach 6,000 people per episode by August 31st, 2019. And I want us to reach 15,000 people per month by March 29th, 2020. Have you been enjoying multiple episodes of the Heart Healthy Hustle? I'm thrilled to share with you an exclusive invitation to join our new Facebook community. To get to know other Heart Healthy Hustlers, simply go to thehearthealthyhustle.com/Facebook, where you can expect to see different members of our community being featured weekly in Facebook Live calls. I appreciate all of your love and support, and I will see you in the next episode. Remember, be generous on every occasion, there is a story for you, and live wide open.